We share good news with people everywhere. That's what we do. We live and we announce and we share good news. Now, a lot of people respond to that. And when they do, what now? What happens? We disciple. We don't make disciples to ourselves. We make disciples to Jesus. We talk, we live, we eat bread together, we drink coffee together, we spend time together. Again, my issue with discipleship is not a methodology, because churches, your church, may have a particular methodology, and when I'm told it, I go, I love it. Another church has got another methodology. I love it. My real interest is discipleship. That once somebody has come into relationship with Jesus Christ, then what happens is they begin to grow in that relationship. Discipleship is about basically being a learner, the Word of God. We're not going to have Christian maturity without a process of being discipled in the Word of God. Prayer, life, generosity, kindness, justice, all of those things that may not have been a part of our life and consciousness before we were exposed to good news, but now that we are exposed to these things, there are certain things that happen in us. It's a maturing process. So methodologies are never really at the base of when I'm talking to churches or people or pastors about these words. Evangelism, discipleship, becoming a learned one as a follower of Jesus. It's what happens after you've stepped into the good news. Leadership multiplication. Well, this is the process I've understood. We announce good news. Some people respond. When those people respond, we then disciple them. Out of those disciples, I've watched this for years and years and years. All of a sudden, you realize there's some people that are showing more interest maybe than others. They stick around longer. They ask more questions. They press in. They don't like $2 answer to $20 questions. And they poke and push a little bit. What are they just trying to be annoying? No, they're leaders. You know, when you keep your eyes open for leaders, you begin to see them. Leadership multiplication is so very important because it's just the way life is. So where do leaders come from? They come from the disciples. This is a very important thing. Let me just put it in here. We got to be careful we don't try to make leaders before they've become disciples. But we don't have to wait forever for them to become leaders either. I believe there's a little bit of progression here. The apostles were first. They started listening to Jesus. They responded to Jesus. They hung out with Jesus. Jesus called them to himself that they could be with him. Our vernacular, hang out. And then as time goes on, they become the very leaders and foundation of the church. So I see it as a very broad thing. And then we see the diversity. Let's speak of diversity. Diversity is inclusion. Diversity is understanding the way God has made the human race, how we're wired, men and women. And then in a church, you've got little guys, you have young people, you've got teenagers, you have young adults, you have middle-aged, and then you have your sages, your seasoned saints. Diversity includes all of that. Ethnicity. Red, yellow, black, and white. Linguistic diversity. Now, when we're talking about diversity in the United States, at this point, we got to remember the world has come here. And I love it. I come from a place when I went to high school, there was one African American and one Asian family in my entire high school. Now, in the school system where I live, there's like 17 different languages represented in that school system. Imagine that. To me, it's like, wow, we're not having to cross the world to share our faith. So diversity, inclusion, multi-ethnicity, the whole richness of cultures that come and worldviews that come into blend here. So when we talk diversity, we're not speaking of one piece of diversity. I'm talking about the whole thing. Men and women, all the generations, the different linguistic groups, the different ethnic groups, African American, Latino, Asian, Eastern European, Anglos, the whole mix. This is where richness is found. Our growth has no ceiling when we continue to include people that have been formed in different realities, see the world differently, interpret life differently, have a formed theology that comes from a different angle. All of that blended together. That diversity is rich. Where does it come from? Because we're indiscriminate in sharing the good news. And then as people respond, we're committed to help them in their journey called discipleship. From the disciples come these incredible leaders, and then we go through a process of recruiting and training and deploying and nurturing and monitoring. It's a wonderful thing. And the fact that it's broad and wide, whosoever will, we include everybody. What a way to live. This is why EDLD, evangelism, discipleship, leadership, multiplication, and diversity, we continually doing it again. We do it over and over and over. Somebody says, well, what's the new thing? Nowadays I say, what's going on? Oh, we're just winning people to Jesus. Well, yeah, but Phil, okay, I get that, but really what's happening? Well, we disciple them, and we see some leaders being multiplied, and we're including everybody. So it's a rich thing. Here's my challenge. Try it out for 10 years. If this absolutely depresses your life and the life of your church, if focusing in on evangelism, discipleship, leadership, multiplication, and diversity, if this ruins your church, in 10 years we'll have a different conversation.